welcome to this first video of mine. I thought I'd give this a go and see where it takes us. Hi, I'm Katie, and I am going to share with you today the books that I read in May. So let's go. First book that I read at the beginning of May was Rainbows for Sale. It's a Heartlines published book by Jane Pitt. This was a very interesting book. I'm not very familiar with this Heartline series. Overall, I would say that I enjoyed it fairly enough. It's definitely not a favorite of mine for sure. Our main girl is Lucy. She's 15, just going on 16. The book practically opens up on her 16th birthday. And I'm not too familiar with UK culture, or maybe just UK culture around the time that this book was published. I was a bit surprised that Lucy is assumed to be out of school at this age, and as somebody who grew up in the US, you don't leave high school until about 17 or 18, but she's 16 and everybody in her life treats her as an adult pretty much. She has a steady boyfriend, and it is practically assumed amongst the family that they will get married soon or in the coming years. She has known him all her life since she was a child, and it's just a pattern with them, and she seems happy, or so she tells herself. The other main players in the book are most predominantly her Aunt Jill and her two parents. And Aunt Jill is a very interesting character in this book. At first, she's promoted as a confidant of Lucy, somebody who can get down on her level and understands her, and is almost like a very best friend role model for her that she might not have in her mother or her father. But Aunt Jill is actually part of my big issue with the book, because as goes with these types of books, there is a love triangle. Yes. Lucy meets Tom Reynolds after her birthday party when she goes for a walk along the beach. He's kind of a bad boy type, is not of the town. He's an outsider, so to say, meaning that he's from London, basically. Because this is a seaside town in coastal England, I believe. But anyway, she meets Tom Reynolds, and then the life that she planned to be her life going forward all seems to be hitting roadblock after roadblock. She all of a sudden doesn't seem happy with her current boyfriend, Tony. Her home life seems a bit stagnant now, and Aunt Jill, who she would regularly confide into, is definitely not approving of this relationship and thinks that it's just an infatuation. And this relationship with Tom, which she does do on the side while continuing to date Tony, it happens very fast. At first, she very much hates him. She does digs at him, insults him, in regards to thinking that he's almost of a lower class than she is. But in just a matter of days or a few weeks maybe, time is kind of funny in this book, she falls in love with Tom, and she wants to be with Tom instead of Tony. So she confides this in her Aunt Jill, who does a complete character turn. Now, yes, we can understand an adult in this role might be like, oh, are you sure that you're not rushing into this? You haven't known this boy very long, and so forth, which would be reasonable. But Aunt Jill kind of takes it to a different level. It seems like all of a sudden she doesn't have very much trust in Lucy and does everything she can to put a pin in this romance. And by the end of the book does end on a very bittersweet note. I won't go into too much detail if by chance somebody watching this might want to seek out this book, whether on some used book site or eBay. But yeah, it ends on a very bittersweet note between the love connections in the book. Though one point I will mention from the end of the book that I had a big issue with, and I know it's probably just due to the times, because women's rights probably weren't as strong then as they are now. But there is a point where Lucy's boyfriend Tony finds out that she's been sneaking out with Tom behind his back. And yes, that's a reasonable thing to be upset about, but he takes it a bit too far and he hits Lucy, and nothing really happens to that. Nobody ever really finds out or says that that's like really sucky thing to do, to hit your girlfriend. I mean, you can be upset, but you don't have to get physically violent. And what's worse is that Lucy, in her inner monologue, says that she feels like that's okay because she deserved it. And it's like, sure, Lucy, you probably shouldn't have cheated on your boyfriend, but you don't deserve to be physically harmed because of it. But yes, Rainbows for Sale, that's my first read in May. And if we're doing this on a star ranking system, I think I would give it 2.5, 3 stars out of 5. So yeah, moving on. Our next book is, to many people watching this, you may be very well familiar if you are a connoisseur of vintage teen series, but it is a Sweet Valley book. It is Sweet Valley High by Francine Pascal. It is a super thriller edition. I believe that this is the first super thriller in the branching off series of super thriller books called Double Jeopardy. I am a very new person to the Sweet Valley High universe. I'm just very lightly familiar with it. I know that there are some very passionate fans, and part of me hopes to be one day as I get better acquainted with it. But anyway, as I've been trying to seek out these books, I got this one and another Sweet Valley book at my local thrift store, and I was interested in starting the series, but I know that it follows very extensive storylines and it's a very expansive series. I think there's like 200 editions or more, so I was a bit intimidated by it, if I'm being honest, not in a bad way, but I didn't want to start into a main series book and possibly be confused by what's going on because I didn't start from the beginning. If you're a Sweet Valley High fan watching this, I don't know if it's a big issue to start anywhere, but just for my own perfectionist's sake, I think I'd like to start from the first book and at least read a good chunk of the series in order before I begin hopping around, just so I know the characters better first. But I was eager to start it, and I had the super thriller edition, and in my research it seemed like an okay enough edition in the series to read first if I hadn't already known too much about the series, because I believe these super thrillers aren't too wrapped up in the main continuity of the series. Like, it takes place in certain times in the books, but there's separate stories. For example, this one takes place during summer break, and other than Jessica and Elizabeth and their family, you don't really see any of their friends interacting with them. It's just very much a separate story, it seems like to me. But anyway, let's get into it. I very much enjoyed this book. I'm a fan of teen mysteries, vintage teen mysteries, as you can see from my vintage Nancy Drews here. So this was very nice. I found the mystery very intriguing, and through this first introduction to it, Jessica and Elizabeth, I found them very interesting and amusing. Obviously, as you may know if you were more familiar, Elizabeth is the more bookish, academic, she's the good girl. She does everything right, and she has a very strict moral code. And Jessica, on the other hand, is the wild sister. She's very boy crazy, very much into appearances and fashion and things that other people may view as superficial. But anyway, this story sees them at the beginning of their summer break. They are about to start an internship at a local newspaper in town, and Elizabeth, this seems to be her dream because she hopes to be a journalist one day, so she's taking this very seriously. where Jessica, who was also offered an internship as well, is less so serious about it. For her, it's more an opportunity to meet older, attractive men that work at the paper, one of which she already has her eyes set on. His name is Seth. He's an older guy. I believe that he's college age, maybe like 20, 21. And he is a junior editor at the paper, I believe, but he is also on the side a mystery writer, which just makes him much more interesting to Jessica. It's very glamorous in her eyes that he leads this very colorful life. Meanwhile, Elizabeth feels that she should take it more serious and not just think about boys or pursuing a relationship with this older guy. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's boyfriend, Jeffrey, I believe his name is mentioned, but he is not in the book. He is, I believe, a lifeguard or a camp counselor at a children's camp a few hours away from their hometown, so he is not in the picture, and Jessica sees this as an opportunity to hook Elizabeth up with a new guy, because she doesn't seem to like Elizabeth's taste in boyfriends, and she wants to pick a boyfriend for her. Jessica is a very chaotic character, and through what I've researched, I know a lot of people seem to prefer Elizabeth, but I actually felt very amused by Jessica's antics. The story seems very much focused more on Jessica than Elizabeth per se, just in my opinion. But anyway, the guy that she wants to match up with her sister is actually the friend or roommate of their older brother, who was also home from college for vacation. But the only issue is that this friend of their brother's has a long-distance girlfriend, so even if he was he has a long-distance girlfriend, so at this point he's not interested in the twins. But that doesn't stop Jessica. Jessica plans out this very elaborate plot to get Elizabeth hooked up with him, and she forges a letter from this guy and slips it under Elizabeth's pillow to make her seem like this guy has a big crush on her, thinking that if Elizabeth knew this guy was so into her, that Elizabeth might be swayed to cheat on her boyfriend. But this plot point will actually come up later in the book when the mystery kind of opens up. So back to the newspaper, trying to impress Seth, Jessica starts making up fake news stories, saying that she has intel on them. Quite very colorful stories about murder plots or just suspicion of neighbors and so forth. And this guy surprisingly believes them at first. And when he does believe them and writes an op-ed on it to give to the editor check reads it and sees that it's totally implausible and none of this ever happened, it's false. And Seth gets very upset with Jessica, and rightfully so. But it's partly his fault for believing it in the first place, in my opinion. It's so outrageous. But anyway, he gets upset with her, and she almost loses her internship, but after some pleading, she just gets placed in the computer rooms to do some coding and filing and stuff like that, which she hates because she's with an older woman and there's no cute guys down there, so this is her nightmare. But anyway, this is when our mystery opens up. So one evening when Jessica is going home, she's in the parking garage and sees a man with a woman, but the woman is dead, seems to be dead, and she's wrapped up in a blanket and he's taking her out of the trunk of a car. And Jessica freaks out. She's the only other person in this parking garage. The parking attendant is seemingly nowhere to be found. So obviously this nefarious looking guy sees Jessica, and without a moment's notice, she jumps in her car and just flees. She's freaked out, and she goes home. She so terrified, and she lets everybody know about it. And surprise, surprise, the dead girl actually turns out to be the boyfriend of their brother's best friend, Adam, the guy that she wanted to hook up with Elizabeth. So obviously, in cases like this where they look to the partner of the person in question, they arrest Adam, which he didn't do it. Everybody seems pretty knowledgeable in that he didn't do it, but the fact of the matter is he gets taken in anyway, and all hell breaks loose from then on out, and Jessica basically becomes her very own Nancy Drew. So I won't get too much more into detail from there on out. This is probably easier to access, so I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but yes, and on a star rating system, I would give this, you know what, I'll give it 4 out of 5 stars. I very much enjoyed it, and I look forward to actually getting to read the Sweet Valley High series in order and get to know the characters more. So yeah, moving on. The third book that I read in May is the Sweet Dreams romance. It is the 15th book in the series. It is Thinking of You by Jeanette Nobile. I hope I'm pronouncing that right either way. This was a very sweet, fluffy read, very relaxing to read, and also a very quick read. I believe that I finished this in 2 days, though if I had just had all the time to read, I probably could have finished it in 1. The Sweet Dreams books, if you are unfamiliar, it's a series of books, but not a series in which you follow one character. It's kind of like Harlequins for teenagers, if that makes sense, but obviously devoid of any raunchiness. It's just very fluffy high school stuff, which I'm plenty okay with. Thinking of You was a very lovely read. We follow Fran. It is the beginning of her summer vacation. If you've noticed here, I kind of pick books that equate to the time of year we're in. So in May, it felt like if I'm going to read some teen YA, why not read ones that take place at the end of the school year, get that summer mood going. So we have another summer vacation book. Fran is quite a bookworm. She's very mousy, very shy. She's not that confident in herself. She does immensely well in school, though much of her troubles come from the fact that her aunt is her history teacher, and she is very strict with her, much to do with the fact that her aunt's sister, her mother, is dead, and that Fran and her sister are the sole children of her single dad, so her aunt feels like it is her place to be the woman in her life. And this seems to be very much well-intentioned for the most part, but she very much just breathes down Fran's neck and puts way too much pressure on this young girl. Like, some parts are just very upsetting to read because she just very much goes in deep on, like, this is what I want you to do, you need to do it, no ifs, ands, or buts. So anyway, Fran is excited for the summer. She doesn't know yet what that might hold. So on her last day of school, she confides in her sister that she has a crush on this guy, and being shy, she doesn't think it will actually end up going anywhere. But her sister is much more outgoing and fun-loving, so she wants to help Fran get out of her shell a bit, and she's like, well, this summer you'll get to know your crush better with my help. And Fran's a little dubious of this due to her more quiet nature, but she is very much interested in this new boy, Paul, and she thinks that maybe it's okay to take some of her sister's advice and crawl out of her shell a little bit. But this all comes to an abrupt halt when Aunt Jill comes over that evening and announces to Fran that she's found this great opportunity for her, and that is a summer school program at Harvard. If you know, Harvard is one of the very illustrious Ivy League schools in the United States. This book does take place in Massachusetts, where Harvard is located, so the campus is very close to them, which all rings perfect in her aunt's mind. Like, Fran will take these summer programs, and the goal of these summer programs is that Fran, who will be starting her senior year of high school in the fall, will be able to skip that and just start as a freshman at Harvard. And Fran is very much not into this idea at first. She does not want to be railroaded by her aunt into doing things that she doesn't want to do, but she doesn't know how to say no because she doesn't like disappointing people. And I think we can all relate to that. It's hard sometimes to voice your own opinions when a lot of other people are pressuring you, but Fran's father is very much more lenient towards his daughters, and he lets Fran know that if she doesn't want to do it, she doesn't have to, and maybe she could take an internship at the newspaper in which he works. And she very much likes the idea of that. She likes the idea of journalism, so at first she's like, okay, I'll go do it. Fran's sister wants her to say no outright, which is reasonable. It's like, yeah, just voice your opinion, Fran. But Fran's like, you know what, I'll give it a try for like a week or two, and then we'll see where we go from there. But when Fran is going to the Harvard campus, she realizes that her crush, Paul, works at a bike shop just in Harvard Square, which is very close to the campus. So at first she's like, oh, if I stay in this summer program, I'll get to see Paul almost every day, and maybe that'll make it easier to get to know him. But she soon realizes that the school program is very miserable. This boy in her class becomes very enamored with her. His name is Ajit. I believe he is of Indian descent. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Forgive me if I'm not. But she does not have a crush on him in return. She thinks that he's very nice enough, but he comes up much more later in the book. So Fran is continuing her school program at Harvard, not enjoying it at all, but she is getting to know Paul a bit more, and begrudgingly she takes some of her sister's advice. She gets like a haircut, and she begins talking to Paul a bit more, and it turns out he likes her too, which in books like these is not surprising. Everything usually kind of falls into place as the story goes. But they take a little biking trip around Cambridge, Massachusetts as their first date, and it's probably my favorite part of the book. It's very much like a travel log. So eventually Fran realizes that she can have this relationship with Paul, but she needs to cut the apron strings with her Aunt Jill. Sorry, not to mention Aunt Jill from the other book, but with her aunt. Second book dealing with aunt problems, a bit of an unintentional pattern here. But yes, I really enjoyed thinking of you. I thought Fran was a great heroine of the story, very relatable to any teen girl or just anybody who can remember their teen years can definitely relate to some of the issues that Fran is going through. So yes, and on the star rating, I would give it 4.5 stars. So yeah. Our fourth and final book in the May wrap-up is an older book than the other three. This one was published it's a 1936 copyright, but I believe that this edition is maybe from the 50s, early 60s at most. But it is a Dana Girls mystery series book. If you are familiar with Nancy Drew, the Dana Girls are another series written under the shared publisher pen name of Carolyn Keene. They're both young girl sleuths. They are sisters. Jean and Louise Dana, they go to a girls' boarding school, so much of their mystery solving happens during the school year there, and there's some very colorful characters that spot the campus that interact with the girls, who are either friends or frenemies or just nasty people who really try to make their lives horrible. But anyway, this is The Secret of the Hermitage. It is the 5th book in the Dana Girls series. I was very eager to read a Dana Girls after reading a lot of Nancy Drew growing up. This is my first though, because I always found the Dana Girls to be much harder to locate than Nancy out in the wild, like used book shopping or antique stores. I just never seemed to find these, but luckily enough, at a recent book sale, I did see 2 copies, and I got them, and The Secret of the Hermitage is the one I decided to read first. I very much got to know and love these 2 sisters very quickly, and I really loved this book. This was a very well put together mystery, if I do say so myself. The Secret of the Hermitage starts with the eldest Dana's sister, who I believe is Louise. She gets mistaken by an ex-prison warden for being this escapee female convent from a local women's prison. And obviously Louise Dana is not a runaway prisoner. She's just a very young teenage girl. But Jean and Louise do get interested in who is this woman, like this woman that ran away, like what's her story. Police come and take her away anyway, which is kind of ridiculous to think about, that they would just take these teen girls to get checked out at the local station just because one guy was like, "You're this missing prisoner," like, what? But anyway, obviously they get cleared. They have an older lady friend of theirs who lives near the campus, who's kind of like a friend of, very friendly with the Dana girls, and she is a collector of statues and figurines. And when they go visit her house, they see initials, and it is the woman that the warden mentioned who had ran away, or they assume it to be. And her name is Nina Reagan, the escapee convict. And she was obviously a very skilled sculptor in her time in prison. And when they see the initials NR, they seemingly think, well, if this girl looks so much like you, Louise, maybe we can find out what her story is. And so they plan on trying to lay the groundwork to go and do that. Meanwhile, back at school, a girl that is not friends with the Dana girls, she seemingly very much hates them. It's implied that she goes out of her way quite frequently to sabotage the girls, which she does in this book as well. She finds out that the warden accosted Louise in public, and she wants to take that to her advantage. So when all the girl students go on a forest expedition for class, she dresses up as the warden and gets Louise alone and like scares her so much, I may add, that she falls down into a ravine and floats miles away from the campus and straight out of town. It is crazy, the stuff that happens in this book. Part of me doesn't want to give too much away though, because I find it a very beguiling mystery that I feel like if you know less going in, the better. So I might linger off there, but as Louise gets swept away, where she ends up, she actually finds out more about Nina Reagan. Obviously, more mysteries open up about her backstory, and things may not be what they seem. So yes, I immensely enjoyed this. This is definitely a 5-star read in my opinion, and I hope to track down more Dana Girls books in the future. So yes, that's all for my May books. I'm not sure what I might want to be doing with this channel, if this is what it becomes. I kind of hope maybe to do individual videos for books to just go more in depth on them, and because I don't really see a lot of videos on YouTube where people talk about vintage books, vintage teen YA books, or stuff like that, so maybe I'm filling in a pocket, at least for YouTube. There's a lot of very educational blogs that I found on this subject, so I recommend looking into that if you are also interested. But yes, I'll end with that, and thank you for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Bye!